Well, hey, everybody, this is Robert, and welcome to Let's Talk, the program of having a conversation with somebody and getting to know people. And today I'm very excited to talk to my guest. His name is Dr. John Carroll. He's a physician and he does a lot of work in the country of Haiti. So we're going to learn a little bit about that today. Dr. Carroll, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Robert. Thanks
All
for
right.
having
Well,
me.
yeah. I'm so pleased to have you on. We have talked in the past. It's been a number of years, though. I guess what I'd like to start out with is you're a physician. So, what turned you to medicine, and what's your background in medicine?
Well, I trained at Chicago Medical School and then University of Illinois. I did my residency in internal medicine and finished in 1987.
All right. So you've been around for a minute or two. Um, what now? How I first found out about you was via your organization, Haitian Hearts. Um, what attracted you to Haiti from Illinois?
Well, I first went to Haiti in 1981 with a small group from Peoria, and we set up a makeshift clinic, a rural clinic about an hour north of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And it was the first time I'd ever been to Haiti. I knew very little bit about it, but I very much enjoyed doing tropical medicine and working with the Haitian people out in the countryside. So I just kept going back.
Okay, but what attracted you to go there the first time? The tropical medicine?
Well, no, just some friends, just word of
Yeah.
mouth at the hospital. Some friends said that they had gone there in the past and worked in a clinic and invited me to go along.
Okay. Good. Good. And of course, I want to give you some time to talk about Haitian Hearts. Can you talk about Haitian Hearts? This is your organization for helping out um, people in Haiti with healthcare issues.
Sure. Well, as I said, the first time I went to Haiti was in 1981, and it wasn't until 1994, 1995 that we formed a not-for-profit Haitian Hearts, which is our organization here in Illinois, and we classically bring kids back to the United States for heart surgery. And it's one of two types of heart surgery. It's either congenital heart disease, in other words, the baby was born with a problem with the heart, or it was rheumatic heart disease, which is an acquired heart problem, usually valvular, and it's due to untreated strep infections in the throat. And so I bring them back for definitive heart surgery and repair in the United States.
Yeah, really, really good stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and link to the website in the show notes when I publish the podcast. Um, Dr. Carroll, what kind of help do you get to keep this program running? I mean, how many times a year do you go back to Haiti?
Well, it can be anywhere from 4 to 8 times during the course of the year. Some of it in the last few years, since 2018, has depended on the stability of the country. In other words, how much work I can get done while I'm there. For example, in Port-au-Prince, with all the street chaos and like right now, the lack of fuel. So when I work in Haiti, I'm usually working in a clinic staffed by Haitian doctors and Haitian nurses, and so I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel when I go down, and I
Mhm.
try to blend in with my Haitian colleagues and the Haitian nurses, and it's a very great experience. I see all comers into the clinic, usually pediatrics, but it can be adult as well, with all the problems that an underserved population has. And then, of course, I keep my eyes and ears open for kids and young adults with heart problems.
Yeah, and you got been doing this for several decades now. Um, how do you keep the program afloat?
Well, my wife and I here in Peoria, we really work on Haitian Hearts projects every day, and that can be newsletters, working with Haitians in Haiti uh, via applications, WhatsApp applications, constant communication with people in Haiti, and we do all we can to keep it going from a financial standpoint. We raise money more kind of on an informal basis, really. Maria, my wife, does newsletters, and we try to keep people posted. Also, with the website www.haitianhearts.org, I try to post things almost every day as to what's going on in Haiti to keep people uh, up to date with actually what's happening on the ground in Haiti.
Yeah. How do you get hospitals in the U.S. to work with you?
Some of it is by word of mouth. And so, for example, when I have a new patient in Haiti, whether it's a baby or a rheumatic heart disease patient, what I do is, of course, I examine the patient in Haiti, collect all the information I can, get as much data on the patient, for example, an echocardiogram, chest x ray, lab results. And then I bring back the echo. And now a lot of it's digital echocardiograms, and I will send the echocardiogram to different medical centers in the United States, to different physicians in the United States, to have them review the echo to see if they believe the patient is a good surgical candidate, and then start working with their administration in that hospital to accept the patient.
Is that mostly a positive experience?
Well, it's both. It
Yeah.
can be positive and negative. It's positive if the hospital and the physician accepts the patient and we get the patient here in good shape and there's a good outcome. Sometimes, of course, there's not a good outcome. Patients are very sick.
Right.
Uh, and they might not be operable in the first place, or the results might be less than optimal with the surgery. So there's any number of circumstances that can occur.
Yeah. So you and your wife and Haitian Hearts, what kind of stumbling blocks do you face?
Well,
Committing
uh,
account?
how long is the show, Robert?
As long as you want it to be.
Right. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, I call it kind of the chain of survival, and the chain of survival are stumbling blocks or points that we get over. So, in other words, identifying the patient, keeping the patient alive in Haiti, obtaining the visa for travel to the United States, acceptance, of course, in the medical center. And then a lot of times the surgeries are very, very, very tough, very, very big, not all the time. And so a stumbling block can be just the difficulty of the surgery, possibly repeat surgery, um, having a host family that's willing and able to take care of a Haitian child or young adult, and then getting the person back to Haiti. Those are all um, parts of the chain of survival, as I call it.
Sure. Sure. So let's go ahead and dive into the country itself. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of Americans, who is the bulk of this audience, that know, a few spots on the news about Haiti, but not much deeper than that. Can you give a broad brush view of Haiti?
Um, I guess I would describe the good things about Haiti at the beginning, and we always hear the negative side of things. But the good
Sure.
side, of course, are the Haitian people themselves. There's
Yeah.
11 million Haitians, and the vast majority of them are poor, but the vast majority are wonderful people. And like anywhere else, they can be taken advantage of by national powers, by international powers that don't work for their benefit. And it could be the Haitian government, it could be outside governments that are not working for the Haitian benefit. Um, and there's a lot of aspersions that are cast all the time as to why Haiti is the way it is. And I won't go into all of those theories. It's like the international community made Haiti bad, or the Haitian politicians are making Haiti bad. And I guess I would just try to stress that the majority of Haitians are so good, they just need a chance. They need to have the basics, and the basics would be what any society needs: and food and shelter and education and a functional government and a functional justice system. Um, Things that we possibly take for granted in the United States, but we can't take any of that for granted. So Haitians just deserve a chance, is the way I would describe it.
Yeah. And you mentioned the government. Can you describe what the government is like? I mean, is now I have experience outside of the United States too, kind of similar to you, and that's in the Philippines. And you drive through Manila, you got the Mercedes Benz and the BMWs, and 2 blocks away, there's people living in a garbage dump, and it's very the lack of a middle class is very, very noticeable.
Mhm.
Um, is that because of the government or the economic system or whatever? I don't know specifically, but what's the government in Haiti like? And is it are there issues with corruption?
Yes, that's the short answer.
Yeah.
As you know, and most of the world knows, that Haiti's president was assassinated on July 7th of this year in his home at 1:30 in the morning. And that murder is so unsolved right now. At least from the general public standpoint, we don't know who really killed the president. And right now, there's 10 or 11 federal politicians that are controlling all of Haiti, which 11 million people. So there's very little going on from a government standpoint right now in Haiti. The new prime minister is a neurosurgeon who is supported by the United States. Some people think that's good. Some people think it's bad. But the Haitian government is, for all that exists right now, is doing what they can, let's say, but there's not a whole lot going on. There's a lot of dysfunction. The justice system in Haiti has been corrupt. Corruption is a big part of the Haitian government, and it has been for a long time. It didn't just start.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of economic system do they have?
I'm no expert on economic
Mhm.
systems, but I would just say it's kind of capitalism in its barest forms. You know, there's a very high unemployment rate in Haiti, so it's a it's a non-structured job situation in Haiti. If I have some carrots to sell or toothpaste to sell, I do that on the street corner. I sell some soda
Mhm.
and soap on the street corner. That's how the majority of Haitians kind of stay alive. They do barter as well. So the formal job sector is not what you would call developed as in other societies.
Yeah. Is religion a big part of life in Haiti?
Yes, religion is a big part of life in Haiti, and the majority of Haitians would be Christian, and they put God in front of anything and everything, and they end almost every sentence with "If God is willing, si bon Dieu voulait."
Mhm.
I will eat today if God is willing. I will send my kids to school if God
Mhm.
is willing. My child will become better from a health standpoint if God is willing. So the individual Haitians really depend on God because they don't feel they have anybody or any other thing to depend on.
Yeah. I noticed you. I guess you were speaking French. Do you speak French and Creole, or one or the other?
Well, that was Creole,
Oh, that was
and
Creole.
yeah, I speak some Creole and a very little French
Yeah,
and some Spanish.
yeah. Um, so, I mean, you go down there as a doctor, and where? I mean, is there any kind of a hospital system in Haiti that's worth speaking of? I have no idea.
Haiti has a couple of public hospitals that are state-run hospitals in Port-au-Prince. They are frequently, this employees are frequently underpaid by the Haitian government. I would call these hospitals pretty bare bone. They're barely functional. Right now, with the fuel crisis, and there is a fuel crisis in Haiti right now due to the fact that gangs in Port-au-Prince are holding up the fuel trucks. So fuel is important from a diesel standpoint, let's say, to power generators, which provides electricity to the public hospitals. So the two public hospitals in Port-au-Prince are barely functioning now, and many private hospitals in the last couple of weeks have closed their doors or partially closed their doors due to the lack of fuel.
So if you go to a hospital in Haiti, what kind of amenities do they have? If you're able to even get in, do you have to pay for your own products and
Um,
or bring
fam-
your own, or I mean, how does that work?
Family members frequently go on the street and buy the antibiotics and buy other necessities for the person in the hospital. They basically care for the non-medical needs in the hospital of their family member. They sleep under the bed, they bathe the patient, they bring in food, they bring in water.
Mm.
Those are not provided in the public hospitals in Port-au-Prince. Um, and so family members get a huge amount of the responsibility of caring for the person in the hospital. And then let's say I'm the physician and I write an IV antibiotic. The family member either goes to the pharmacy and buys the antibiotic or goes on the street and buys the antibiotic for the patient. So oxygen, of course, is a big deal with lack of oxygen concentrators now for COVID patients. And obtaining an X-ray is a big deal. For example, if you think I might have pneumonia, tuberculosis, a chest X-ray can cost $10 in a public hospital. So that might be over the ability of the family member to pay for that.
Yeah. What's the daily or monthly income for the average Haitian? Do you know?
You read everything, but maybe a couple dollars a day if
Yeah.
they could earn that on the street corner.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to go ahead and ask you about the gangs. Of course, that's one of the stories about Haiti recently. Of course, we read about the assassination, and then this group of 17, I believe they were missionaries. I'm not 100% sure, um, that were kidnapped, and I believe they are still kidnapped. And um, but this is nothing new, is it?
No, gangs are nothing new in Haiti.
Yeah.
They've been around a long time, and you're right. There were 17 missionaries kidnapped about 4 weeks ago now. The group is based out of Ohio. There's around 16 Americans and one Canadian, and even about a 9-month-old baby is involved. They're still being held. Um, there are many different gangs in Port-au-Prince controlling their own areas. And then I'm sure some gangs function autonomously, and others are supported by at least lore has it that politicians are supporting some of the gangs in different parts of the slums in Port-au-Prince
Mhm.
to help control the vote in that area. Yeah, gangs are nothing new, and really they have a stranglehold on Haiti now. And one of the biggest strangleholds is, as I mentioned, they're controlling a lot of the fuel in the ports that come into Port-au-Prince and then ideally would be shipped to different parts of the capital and different parts of the country. The gangs are either kidnapping the drivers, holding the trucks, or blocking the roads where these fuel tankers would go. So it's a big, big deal. The fuel issue in Haiti is a big deal.
Are other products affected the same way though too? I mean, if a country or a NGO or something is trying to send some food or water, it still has to get through the gang somehow, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Right.
Yeah,
If they come via the ports, yes, they would have to get through who's ever controlling the port that day. That's right.
right. Um, but I noticed in some of your writings, actually from probably 15 years ago, you were writing about the gangs back then. So, like I said, this is nothing new. Um, Dr. Carroll, I guess my question is: you're 4 to 8 times a year going to Haiti and treating patients and doing good work. Did you ever find yourself in danger?
I don't really feel that the danger I found myself in was significant. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I try not to, look for trouble. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
When I went in September, unfortunately, I went up north to Cap Haitian, and for the last 10 years, I've worked with a Catholic priest up there named Father Andre Sylvestre. And I got into Haiti on September 6th of this year. And Father sent a driver for me. He has a parish in about 20 minutes south of Cap Haitian, which is Haiti's second largest city, and he has a rural medical clinic. It's really good clinic, uh, and he was shot and killed the day I got there. Actually, almost the minute I got there, in the streets of Cap Haitian at about 3 in the afternoon. And so it was a robbery, but Father Andre had to be the most beloved person in northern Haiti, and that's taking up several million people. So it was just a disaster to lose this man who had was doing a lot of good for many, many people in northern Haiti, and it just didn't need to happen, but it happened. And stories like this keep people out of Haiti. They keep the diaspora, the Haitian people living in the United States. They don't want to come back to have problems such as that. And Father, that should have never happened to Father. It's just a disaster. And my wife and I were really good friends with Father, and we miss him a lot.
Yeah, that's too bad. And but I guess that's something that happens when um, a population gets so desperate. I don't. Me or you would never consider doing something like that. I guess that's fair to say, right?
Hmm.
Right.
Right.
We're just not, and we're not even close to those desperate situations. I read in one of your articles recently that you write that Haiti has no security. So, is there no police? Is there no military that can get these gangs under control, or is this just futile, or what?
Right now, it's fairly futile. The
Mhm.
police seem to be undergunned by the gangs in Port-au-Prince and in Cap Haitian as well. The police are facing huge obstacles into trying to get Haitian society back safe again. Parents are afraid to send their kids to school because they don't know if the child's going to come back. From potential kidnapping scenario.
Yeah. Oh, what a shame. Um, I want to talk about the UN peacekeepers. And several years ago, I worked at a lab where one of my coworkers was Haitian, and he was telling me uh, some of the atrocities he witnessed with the UN peacekeepers. Now, the UN peacekeepers, did they start going to Haiti prior to the earthquake?
The earthquake was in 2010. And so going back a couple of decades, actually, in 1994, the United States, we had troops on the ground in 94 when we put President Aristide back into power under Bill Clinton.
That's right.
And then when we left, the UN came in 1994, and they were there for several years. However, jumping ahead to 2004, President Aristide there was a coup against President Aristide a second time, and the UN peacekeepers came in 2004 and stayed until roughly 2017. And so the UN has had a big presence in Haiti in the 2000s.
Yeah, and what my friend was telling me about was some of the atrocities um, that they were abusing some of the locals. Some of them got shot in the process of um, trying to fight off the gangs. Innocent people were getting shot too. Is this a true story?
It is true.
Yeah.
In 2005, 2006, 2007, there was a lot of gang activity in the major slums in Port-au-Prince, and so the UN so-called peacekeeping forces were fighting the gangs in these slums, and there was lots of bloodshed, especially from the gang standpoint, as well as innocents that were caught in the crossfire. And at one point, the UN was even shooting down from a helicopter onto the slum where I work in the Capitol, and this was December 22nd of 2006, and a lot of innocent people were shot and maimed or killed by the minister soldiers in the helicopter shooting down.
Is anybody ever held accountable?
No.
No. Okay. Well, sticking with the subject of the UN peacekeepers, I mean, it's been pretty directly linked. Back in 2010, they brought the cholera strain with them that caused
Correct.
all that damage. Um, Other than Yemen, I think that's the biggest cholera outbreak I've ever seen. It's about what 800,000 cases over a course of a decade.
Mhm.
Can you talk about your experience going down there during this epidemic?
The cholera epidemic was, as you say, it was epic, and it was the largest cholera outbreak in the world at the time. And like you said, from about October of 2010 until 2019, roughly, there was cholera in Haiti as well as in the Dominican Republic and in some other countries it spread to some degree. But it was introduced to the Haitian population uh, unwittingly by the Nepal UN soldiers at an army base just north of the capital. And so cholera spread in the waters of one of the main rivers in central Haiti. And then, as you indicated, there's 800,000, probably many more than 800,000 were infected with cholera. So working with the cholera patients was nothing like I had ever experienced. It was a disease, if you will. It was fun to treat for the physician. It wasn't fun if you had cholera and had a severe case of cholera, but it was fun to treat in that most people got better with just IV fluids.
Hmm.
And so when a person is really sick with cholera, what they die of is shock because they don't have the fluid. They've lost so much fluid due to the cholera bacteria. They've lost fluid, they're in shock, and their organ systems shut down. But if you give a patient like that early enough in the course IV fluid to replace the fluid that they're losing, you save their lives. And I believe as physicians in Haiti became more attuned and accustomed to treating cholera as the years went by, there was a 1% or less than 1% mortality rate with the cholera in Haiti. And I might add this, Robert,
Hmm.
when a population gets cholera, there's mild, moderate, and severe cases. And the mild and moderate, we could usually just send home with some oral rehydration salts.
Sure.
The severe cases, we needed to admit and give them the IV fluid, sometimes followed with antibiotics as well.
Yeah. So you did see adjustment over a period of time in the treatment, and uh, I mean, if I thought I saw that Haiti didn't see cholera for about a century prior to that.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know how much cholera you see in Illinois. So I mean, that's probably the first time you've seen it in a
Not
while.
every day.
Not every day, right? Yeah. And I think I read in one of your articles you called I think it was you called cholera a politicized disease.
Hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Um, what did I mean by that? That's a good question. It's politicized from the standpoint it mainly attacks people that don't have access to sanitary conditions, access to clean water, and access to medication. And if we consider or I should say IV fluids too. If we consider all that politicized, then yeah, it's a very politicized disease attacking mainly the the poor in the world.
Yeah. So, what other uh, unique infectious diseases did you see while you were working there over the decades that you would have never seen here?
Good question. Um, well, I would probably have to put cholera there, of course, and I saw lots of tuberculosis. Did see some leprosy. Saw some anthrax as well.
Hmm.
It was cutaneous anthrax. It wasn't pulmonary anthrax. I saw neonatal tetanus. I saw
Sure.
adult tetanus. Um, so, all the diseases of the so-called stupid diseases. So Zika and chikungunya, of course. A lot of malaria over the years. Um,
And
that's
probably a wide variety of parasites and
wide variety of parasites,
yeah,
leptospirosis,
yeah,
kind of you name it.
yeah, yeah. You just pull out Manson's tropical diseases, and yeah,
Right.
I've seen it. um, you mentioned well, the Dominican Republic. That's the neighbor. What kind of relationship does Haiti have with their neighbor on Hispaniola and the other Caribbean islands? Are they isolated, or do they have good relationships with these other countries?
No, I wouldn't call it a good relationship with the DR, especially. Right now, there are purportedly 300,000 Haitians that are living in the Dominican Republic, and they usually go for work, to work and send money back to Haiti. Um, their relationship with the DR has been tumultuous, chaotic since at least the 30s, 1930s, and just within the past week. It's in the past 2 weeks for sure. The Dominican has been saying, the authorities have been saying that Haiti is our number one biggest problem, our number one situation due to the gang violence in Haiti, all the problems in Haiti. People are coming over into the DR and they're using our public resources like public hospitals, etc. And just within the last week, supposedly Dominican public hospitals are saying Haitians are not welcome. I don't have definite proof of that, but the sentiment is there for sure. And then just within the last couple of days, the Dominican authorities have said that all the Haitians in the DR need to register with their local Dominican authorities, where they're at, what village they're in, what they're doing, and then if they move around, they have to let the authorities know they're moving around. And don't forget, Robert, that Haitians are used as basically slaves in the sugarcane fields in the Dominican Republic to cut the sugarcane, and they're paid very little, or if they get anything at all. And their living conditions are really bad. So the Dominican in relationship with the Haitians is not what I would call stellar at this point.
Yeah. Have you been in the Dominican Republic?
Yes.
I'm sure, right? Um, when you cross the border, are you like in two different worlds?
Yes and no.
Mhm.
Um, you can tell the difference to some degree that you're in the Dominican when you cross from the Haitian to the Dominican side. Um, things seem better. In 2015, 2016, I was able to work in a border region between Ansa Haiti, which is in southeastern Haiti, and Pedernales, Dominican Republic, the other border city. And those were the days when the Dominicans were expelling tens of thousands of Haitians out of the Dominican back into Haiti, and many of them were staying in a refugee camp on the Haitian side of the river under terrible circumstances. Many of these Haitians had actually been born in the Dominican Republic, and they didn't speak Creole that well. They spoke Spanish.
Mhm.
And even older people with Haitian blood, by older people, 70-year-old people that had been in the Dominican for decades, were being expelled by the Dominican authorities. And so it was very, very tough there. And then for the Haitians that were literally being thrown out uh, by vigilante groups in different Dominican villages. Um, so yes, the Dominican is better off than Haiti, quite a bit better off. I just hope that the Dominican authorities could, I don't know, I hate to sound too lovey-dovey here, but just start loving their brothers and sisters that are on the other side of the river, uh, and giving them a break, so to speak. And Dominican authorities would probably say, well, we give them a break. They come over here, they have their C-sections here, they deliver their babies here, so we are giving them a break. So it's a tough situation, not unlike what we have on our southern border in the United States.
Mhm. Wow. Um, I wanted to ask you something a little bit more personal, as far as particularly as far as your writing. I was going through your blogs, your Substack, and the other blog, PJ, is it PJ Star or something like that?
Yes.
PJ Media, something like, I can't remember the exact title, but you wrote pretty extensively over the past X amount of months about, let me get the name correct, a Mr. Valcine Chenet. Am I saying
Hmm.
that right?
Yes, Valsin Chenet, a
Okay.
Haitian man. Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you mind sharing that story?
not at all. Mr. Chenet came to see me for the first time in the spring, summer of 2020. And he obviously had a serious heart problem due to a mitral valve issue. His mitral valve on the left side of his heart wasn't working right. So he was in congestive heart failure. So Mr. Chenet is in his 40s, has two little kids. They live in the mountains above Port-au-Prince, and he needed heart surgery. Um, Mr. Chenet, my wife and I looked for a spot for him in the United States. We found a spot, a, a cardiac surgeon and a medical center that have helped us tremendously in the past with Haitian patients. They accepted him right away, and this was in about July of 2020. Well, over the course of the next 10 months, we worked really hard to obtain a visa for Mr. Chenet to travel to the United States. You know, we would go get him, travel with him, take him to the medical center in the U.S. and have him operated, and then with good outcome, return to Haiti where he was a teacher, and he'd be with his wife and kids again.
Mhm.
And he was denied the visa by the American consulate in Port-au-Prince, and they were not willing to tell me why he was denied a visa. We applied a couple of times, and we even filled out a humanitarian parole application, an extensive application that does not go through the American consulate. But while that application for the humanitarian parole was being considered, he died. And so he left a couple nice little kids, a really nice wife up in the mountains without a husband and without a father now. And so nothing's done in a vacuum, as you know. And so there's huge consequences for this man's death. I mean, he was a only supporter, financial supporter for his family. So I stay in contact with his wife at least once a week, and we send her funds via Western Union and hope that she doesn't get robbed at the Western Union station in Port-au-Prince. But so unfortunately, he did not get a surgery. He could have had the surgery. It was to be done pro bono. The American taxpayer would pay nothing for it, and we, of course, would pay for the plane tickets and the visas, the passports, etc., which were already done. So it was very, very, very unfortunate that this man did not get a chance at surgery. and to spend some more good years with his wife and kids.
Yeah, he's a teacher, so I take it he was probably the provider too, right?
He was.
Yeah, that's rough. Um, but I think I read you mentioned something about the president's wife when she was shot. She was able to get out of the country muy pronto. Did that stick in your craw or what?
It stuck in my craw a little bit, but it
Mhm.
wasn't unexpected.
Yeah.
Mr. Chenet didn't have the economic means. He was not of the ruling class. He was just in the kind of the lower middle class,
Mhm.
and so there was no precedence made for him.
Um, with all the trouble in Haiti, I mean, as long as I can, I've been around almost 6 decades. As long as I've been alive, at least, there's always been some problems. Um, has anybody been successful in really helping them? Are there NGOs that are really successful at what they're doing, or any governments, or is it all? I hate to say it, all for naught.
hmm No, that's a good question, Robert. From a medical standpoint, I guess I would answer it, and that Doctors Without Borders have been successful in Haiti over the years. They just got ran out of a gang-controlled so-called suburb in Port-au-Prince called Martissant. But they've done really good work over the years in Haiti. And Paul Farmer's group, Partners Without Health, of course, has been great in Haiti too. And they established really the best hospital in Haiti in a place called Mirebalais, which is an hour and a half from Port-au-Prince, which is a modern teaching hospital. Uh, and I think one of the best things that Paul Farmer ever did, and he's done a lot of good things, is he proved to the world that diseases such as HIV and tuberculosis could effectively be treated in a poverty-ridden environment such as Haiti. And people really questioned that in the 90s is, these poor countries with these poor people, they're not going to be compliant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these diseases can't be treated. In other words, HIV, TB can't be treated, but Paul Farmer proved that they could effectively be treated in resource poor settings. I think that will be one of the greatest legacies of Paul Farmer.
Now you look at Haiti through a different lens than probably the vast majority of people. Um, what what do you see as the U.S. responsibility for Haiti, if any?
Well, number one, don't deport people to Haiti today. Haiti can't accept them right now. They don't have the capacity to take care of people that we're sending back to Haiti from southern Texas or from anywhere. Haiti can't deal with it. Um, I think our responsibility with Haiti would be to walk a fine line between interfering too much and not interfering enough. And then if we assist Haiti, maybe assist is the right word. If we assist Haiti, we need to assist the civil society people, the workers, the churches, so that they can work with the existing Haitian government to create a strong society. In other words, don't just dump a bunch of money somewhere not knowing how it's going to be spent, or dump it where it's going to be spent the wrong way.
Mhm.
Do it the correct way, if it's done at all, in order to, in other words, start at the bottom and start in the middle and then work up.
Do you see the country in the gang and crime problem uh, to the point where UN peacekeepers might be back,
I just have
or maybe some neighboring countries' military will come in to help out? I mean, is this something that you see?
It's possible. I don't know uh, the answer. I don't have a crystal ball. What will happen? What we would be talking about a year from now, for example. Um, It's very difficult, and it's also very interesting too. Uh, there are many Haitian progressives in the United States as well as in Haiti that do not want outside help. They don't want the American boots on the ground anymore. They don't want the UN on the ground. They don't want the Caribbean community on the ground. They want to have Haiti solve the problems themselves. But I have many, 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 many Haitian friends that help me basically every day regarding Haitian Hearts. They would love it if the Americans would come back. They're hungry today. Their kids are home. They don't have water. They don't have food in their houses right now. They don't have security. They would love it if the Americans came back. So
What would you want, John? What would you want?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I wish you didn't ask that, Robert.
Okay, you don't have to answer if you don't want.
I guess I would revert to my answer regarding yes, the United States should assist, but we should assist in the right way and start with members of civil society, such as unions and churches and
Sure.
teachers and people like that.
Yeah, that's all very reasonable, of course. Um, Dr. Carroll, um, I am going to ask you to look into your crystal ball. Um, what do you see as Haiti's future? Are we going to see the same old, or do you see things getting better at any point?
Again, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knows, but yeah, you got more insight than in your pinky than I have in my whole body. So,
Well, I don't like to be too pessimistic, and I'd love to say that a year from now things will be better, but um, I just have to say I don't know.
yeah, fair enough. Well, Dr. John Carroll, you definitely have a heart for Haiti, and um, I'm sure the people there appreciate it, and I appreciate it, and I've appreciated uh, following your writings over the many years now. I think the first time I talked to you was in 2014, I think. I've only been a couple times, but it's been a while. And you're really doing some great stuff there, and I've always appreciated Haitian Hearts, and always more than willing to post that link and try to get people to notice it, of course. And John Carroll, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Robert, for all you're doing too. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.